I think I'm going to go at this essentially as a rock and roll enthusiast who's been really interested in this kind of thing. I got to see the movie a few days ago, did a little digging. I'm a person, I'm in a rock and roll band. I love playing rock and roll. Every July 4th at the St. Paul Summer Program, I treat the students to Jimi Hendrix, Star Spangled Banner. So they get to see an old, bald, 60-year-old play with distortion. What I love about this kind of film, I love films like 20 Feet from Stardom, Tom Dowd, A Man and His Music, Muscle Shoals, Sound City, The Wrecking Crew, Searching for Sugarman, It Might Get Loud. If you've seen any of those, they kind of take the music that we all grew up with, and they give us a background of where it came from, how it influenced people. So you got to see a collection of rock and rollers talk about hearing Link Wray's Rumble and how it influenced them. If you've seen the movie It Might Get Loud, you actually see Jimmy Page playing Rumble and describing how it influenced him as well. So the movie does a great job of giving us a sense of these influences. A couple of things I took from this. So I had heard of Mildred Bailey, but I had no, if you read the Grove Musical Encyclopedia on Mildred Bailey, it says she's a white jazz singer. It actually does not talk about the background. She actually, she grew up in Coeur d'Alene, but then moved to Washington State, where she grew up at age 12 and 13 with a young boy named Bing Crosby. And actually started, her brother and Bing Crosby, they went to California and sang and played. And he credits her with teaching her a lot about how to sing. And so what struck me was just the way the movie links the singing of her Coeur d'Alene area in the same way that those singers, the Eula Lee singers, who were the singer Pura Fay, is just listening to old blues and just saying that's not blues, that's Indian music. The ability to take things that I've loved and listened to, I got to see Sun House back at a Toronto music festival in the 70s. I've loved the Howlin' Wolf albums, and to find out that in fact he's influenced by Charlie Patton. Charlie Patton is clearly getting a lot of his stuff from what he grew up with. I just love movies like this, and the way they open us up to understand music we've loved all our lives, and we can hear it brand new in what they've pointed out. I believe we have other music enthusiasts in the room, and essentially I'm interested in treating this more like a seminar than a class. And so I'm interested in anyone to, I think maybe what I'll do is shut this off and just talk louder. So if people are interested in giving their impressions to the group of what they noticed when they go through this. One last note I have. The movie I got to see to prepare, right after the credits, there are actually more credits that didn't show up. And there was a haunting song that was played through the final credits. I didn't know what it was, so I was watching it on my iPad, Shazamming it, to find out what the song was. And it was by a singer named Karen Dalton, who it turns out was a 60s folk musician who hung out in the village with Dylan and a bunch of people, and had a heroin addiction, and she's one of those people who a group of people loved, and she never got the credit she deserved, and kind of died young. So, like, if anybody knows Karen Dalton, I'm interested in learning more about her. There was a suspicion, there was one comment about the fact that she may have had Native American ancestry, but I couldn't find anything more about her. We have some other musicians in the audience. Specifically, I do know we have a gentleman, Johnny Earthquake is here. So I'm interested in, what were your thoughts as you went through that? Similar, or did you have other things?
Well, one thing that you might not have got, because they didn't really talk about it, about Link Ray, obviously probably because he was poor. Link Ray played on very cheap guitars, and but was able to make great music from them, which is different from the music that you make on expensive guitars. And so, as far as surf music, which he's considered a part of, like Dick Dale was the most famous surf musician, and he would play on like Fender guitars and amps, and rather expensive stuff. And he would have like, Dick Dale would play like 100 miles an hour, guitar lifts. He's the predecessor of modern, speed metal or whatever. But he was doing this on the surf guitar. But Dick Dale was the sort of person you would listen to him, and your jaw would drop to the floor, and you say, "Wow, I should sell my guitar." Whereas Link Ray was playing on cheap, guitars. His recordings were made in really poor studios and released on very small record labels. And you would hear the Link Ray recordings, and you would say, "Wow." You'd open up your Sears catalog and you'd say, "I'm going to buy that $50 guitar, I can do this."
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if it was clear in there, but in the reading about Link Ray, he actually cut holes in the speaker of his amps to get that distorted sound. Which reminded me, Ray Davies came to the Capitol Center, and he did a thing where he would play music and then talk about his life. And he talked about, I'm now forgetting the Kinks song, their big first song, but it was the same thing. It was a faulty amplifier that had a buzz to it that they decided they liked, that actually sort of gave them the sound that a lot of people wanted to listen to. Yeah. But yeah, the idea that you can have a piece of music band that has no lyrics, that really I found stunning. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anybody else notice anything? Any backgrounds based on what you saw there that you could add?
I'd like to make one other comment. I was very happy that they included Redbone in the documentary, and I don't know how many people remember Redbone played in New Hampshire at probably our first outdoor rock festival, the Mount Vernon Rock Festival in 1972. I don't know how many of you were there. This was before, I think before the first album came out.
Were you there?
They actually, yes. They headlined the evening.
They headlined? And how long was their set?
Well, it's probably, being a festival, probably a half-hour set, you know. And I would, they were the headliner, they were at the end of the night, and they hadn't had a record out, so nobody really knew their material. But I would have to quote the novelty artist Larry Verne and say, they sounded like a bunch of wild Injuns.
Did they start the way they described that they would do their
I
concerts
do not
with the
remember
dancing?
them having the Indian costumes.
Okay.
But it was very, you know, like a bunch of wild Indians on stage. And this was before they had Come and Get Your Love, you know, or
Yep.
Witch Queen of New Orleans.
Has anybody else heard of this? Just the four women who were singing at the beginning. Eulalie, the band with the singer Pura Fay. Has anybody heard them? I'm just fascinated by the sound that they had and the way they described that as roots music. So that's a plan for myself to go. Another thing that I thought was really just they're describing this, and you can sort of hear the blues and the way the blues starts, and with Mildred Bailey, maybe the Indian or Native American beginning of sort of the jazz singing, but also the whole section on New Orleans music. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the series Treme that was on HBO, but that description of the way that in the downtown part of New Orleans that they work on creating those costumes and those music to get ready for those celebrations. I thought they captured it really well, and sort of understanding that Monk Boudreaux, the way and the Neville brothers, the way they described the fact that it was I think the polyrhythms of the African music and the 1, 2, 3, 4 of the Indian music. As they started to do that, I don't know about you, but I just started to hear the Bo Diddley beat and everything, and sort of there's that really important sort of New Orleans gumbo that seems to have been definitely spiced by at least a lot of Native American rhythms, etc. So that I found fascinating as well. If you haven't seen Treme, highly recommend it as a series to watch. The music is incredible all through it. Anybody else? Yes.
I was excited to see a young musician who I almost didn't even recognize him, except he was also here in the movie in his present self too, Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
I didn't even recognize his young self playing on stage with Jesse Ed Davis.
Yeah.
And you know, if you haven't seen Taj Mahal, you can still go see him. He's somewhere playing, and he's an amazing, amazing musician. He has so much of all of this stuff in him.
Yeah.
He's played all these different kinds of music, and he's just amazing.
I was kind of stunned. I was familiar with him from kind of the later years, where he's sort of a little more acoustic and roots, and so I'm going to go back and start looking for him. And when Jesse Ed Davis was with him, where it's really straight ahead electric blues. I did read one review. My favorite band all time is the Allman Brothers, and apparently their drummer said for a lot of times, I think it was Statesboro Blues, they wouldn't play or they wouldn't record it because they didn't think they could ever come close to Taj Mahal and Jesse Ed Davis' version of that. So I just saw that quote as I was going this, and I've never heard the Taj Mahal version, so I got to go check that out. So, yeah. Anybody else?
I'd like to make a comment about it wasn't in the movie, but they did talk about people, Native Americans, originally being hiding their heritage and then being proud of it. And one of the first people that I remember being proud of it was one of the members of the Mothers of Invention, Jimmy Carl Black, who on all those early Mothers of Inventions albums would always at some point say, and this is Jimmy Carl Black, the token Indian of the band. And if I could also point out something to look up that was nothing mentioned in the movie, but you mentioned jazz. One of the first jazz rock bands was a band called Everything Is Everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that consisted of a Native American saxophonist named Jim Pepper and a guitar player, I believe, by the name of Chris Hill, who was also the singer.
Mm-hmm.
And they had they dented the top 40 with a song called Wichitaito, which is actually an Indian chant. And I think probably the only Indian chant to chart in the top 40. Billboard's top 40.
When was that?
1970 or 71.
Okay.
This was when, like, jazz and rock were just starting to combine.
Okay. Yeah, I think the thing that I've taken from this film in terms of history is just a greater understanding. I was just stunned when the historian was talking about the slave trade and the fact that they were actually taking Native American men away and sort of describing that as how 85% of African Americans, at least back in that time, could claim Indian ancestry. That just stunned me. And there's a logic there of how this all happened that goes with the demographics of those numbers that I found really intriguing. And at the same time, for the music that we love and the way we appreciate it, it's sort of intriguing and it's logical that it follows. And then there's also the understanding of the horror that went along with the repression of the Native Americans and the slavery, etc. I always remember going to the Delta Blues Museum in Clarkdale, Mississippi. A great, amazing place to go. And there's a map. And if you look at the map, they list, here's where B.B. King grew up. Here, and they list all the people and all the little towns around Clarkdale. It's fascinating. And then you head, 50 miles north and you get to Memphis, and there's a Civil Rights Museum, and you go in there and there's a map and it lists, here's where all the lynchings happened. And it's the same map, and it's the same town names. And you get this juxtaposition of an interest in how the music developed with an understanding of, in certain ways, why the music developed. So I think when we see this kind of film, we've got to think both those things, the pleasure of the music and then the understanding of how the music formed. Yes?
Something that complicates it even further that I found out recently was that I was aware that music plays an integral part in indigenous culture, but it wasn't until 1996, less than 30 years ago, that Native Americans were actually allowed to practice religion. That it was no longer